I can't believe this, I whispered under my breath, staring at the thick envelope that had just been shoved into my hands by a stone-faced courier. My fingers trembled as I tore it open, expecting perhaps another bill, another demand. Another piece of paper reminding me how much I had sacrificed for my son. But what I saw made the blood drain from my face. A court summons, filed by my own son. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled, and I had to clutch the edge of the kitchen counter to keep myself upright. The words on the paper blurred through my tears. But the essence stabbed straight into my heart. He was suing me for incompetence. Attempting to seize control of my finances, of my life? It felt like someone had taken a knife and twisted it slowly in my chest. I had raised that boy. I had fed him, clothed him, stayed up endless nights nursing his fevers, and worked double shifts to make sure he never felt the gnawing hunger I had endured as a child. And now, after years of giving him everything, after handing him $33,400 of my savings, he wanted more. He wanted to declare me incapable to control what was left of my money, my dignity, my independence. I staggered back into the chair at the kitchen table, sunlight through the blinds slicing across the paper in cruel stripes. My hands shook so violently I dropped the summons onto the floor. The silence of the house mocked me. I could almost hear my late husband's voice in my head, calm and stern. Don't let anyone take advantage of you, not even family. But how had it come to this? I closed my eyes and the memories washed over me. My son Daniel was once the light of my life. He was born when I was 32, after years of believing I would never be able to have children. I remember the moment they placed him in my arms. Tiny fists balled tight, a tuft of dark hair plastered to his forehead. Eyes shut tight as he screamed at the top of his lungs. I cried harder than he did. I promised myself then and there that I would give him everything I never had. My own parents had been cold, distant, too consumed with their own problems to care about the dreams of a little girl. My father drank, my mother tolerated. I grew up in a house where silence was thicker than the walls and love was a currency never spent. So when Daniel came along, I swore he would never feel unwanted, never feel small. And I kept that promise. Every birthday cake, every school trip fee, every new pair of sneakers when the old ones weren't even worn out. Yet Ty said yes. I said yes when I should have said no. I said yes when it meant working overtime as a bookkeeper, when it meant skipping meals so he could have what he wanted. I said yes when my back ached and my eyes burned from exhaustion. I told myself I was building him a better future. But as the years passed, I noticed a subtle shift. Gratitude faded from his vocabulary. Expectation replaced it. The first time he demanded money, he was only 16, standing in the doorway of the kitchen with his arms crossed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Mom, I need $200 for the car insurance." "You said you'd help." I remember the sting of his tone. "I said I'd try, honey." "Things are tight right now. Try." He sneered. "You've got money. Don't act like you don't. You just don't want to help me." The words cut deeper than he realized. But I gave him the money. That moment, though, was the first crack in the foundation. And cracks, if ignored, spread silently until the whole structure collapses. Over the next decade, the requests became demands, and the demands became ultimatums. When he was in college, I wired him money every month, tuition, books, rent, groceries. Nights out, he swore, were networking opportunities. I didn't notice the totals stacking up, not at first. But when I tallied everything years later, it was there in black and white. $33,400. I could have paid off my mortgage. I could have fixed the leaking roof. I could have taken the trip to Italy I had dreamed about since I was a girl. Instead, it all went into Daniel's bottomless pit of wants. And then, one day, I said no. It wasn't even dramatic. I remember I was standing at the sink washing dishes when he called. "Mom, I need $5,000. Just a loan. I'll pay you back next month." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because I was so tired. "Daniel, I don't have it. I can't keep doing this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then his voice, cold and sharp. "If you won't help me, Maybe you shouldn't be handling money at all. Maybe you're not capable." I froze. "What are you saying?" But he hung up. That was 3 weeks before the summons arrived. Now, sitting in my kitchen with the court papers spread before me, I felt the walls close in. The betrayal burned in my chest like fire. My own flesh and blood wanted to strip me of control, to paint me as weak, senile, incapable. And the worst part was, some people might believe him. I was 65, living alone, my hair silvering, my hands not as steady as they once were. I thought about the neighbors, about the whispers that would spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? Her son took her to court. Said she's incompetent." The shame would crush me. But shame wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he wanted to take away the little independence I had left. I picked up the phone and called my oldest friend, Linda. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey, you. How are you?" The moment I heard her, my resolve broke. My voice cracked. "Linda, he's suing me. Daniel is suing me." There was a sharp intake of breath. What do you mean, suing you?" I choked out the words between sobs. "He filed a petition. Says I'm incompetent, that he needs to take control of my finances." Silence. Then anger. "That ungrateful little bastard, Linda." I gasped. "No, I mean it. After everything you've done for him. After all the years you sacrificed. And now he wants to strip you of your rights." Her voice trembled with fury. "You can't let him get away with this. You hear me?" I wiped my eyes with the back of my sleeve. "But what can I do? He's my son. He may be your son," she said firmly, "but you're not his victim. Not anymore." Her words lit something inside me. A small spark, fragile but growing. The days that followed were a blur of fear and anger. Letters from his lawyer arrived, filled with cold legal jargon that reduced me to a line item. A case number. I caught myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering if I did look incompetent. The bags under my eyes, the fine lines around my mouth, the trembling in my hands. Would a judge look at me and see weakness? I forced myself to stand taller, to smooth my hair, to steady my voice. But at night, when the house was quiet, the doubts crept in. I replayed every moment of my motherhood, wondering where I had gone wrong. One night, I found myself digging through old boxes of photos, searching for the boy who once clung to my leg, who once called me Mommy, with wide eyes full of love. I found the kindergarten graduation picture. Daniel in a paper cap, grinning with missing teeth. My heart ached. What happened to that little boy? And then I found something else. An old ledger, tucked in between receipts and tax returns. It was a detailed record of every dollar I had given him. Every check written, every transfer made. The total at the bottom, $33,400. I stared at the number, my stomach twisting. Proof that I wasn't stingy, that I wasn't neglectful. Proof that I had given until there was almost nothing left to give. And suddenly I felt something shift. Maybe I wasn't the one on trial. Maybe he was. The first hearing loomed on the calendar like a storm cloud. I barely slept the night before, my heart racing, my mind spinning through every possible scenario. I imagined Daniel walking into the courtroom in his expensive suit, smirking at me, confident he had already won. But I also imagined myself standing tall, my voice steady, the truth finally breaking free like sunlight through a storm. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. A navy dress, modest but strong. My mother's pearls, a reminder of resilience. I pulled my hair back, looked in the mirror and whispered, "You are not weak. You are not incompetent. You are his mother and you are stronger than he knows." When I arrived at the courthouse, the air was heavy with tension. I could see him across the lobby, flanked by his lawyer, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read, part smugness, part pity. I lifted my chin. The bailiff called the case. I walked toward the courtroom door, my heart pounding like a drum. And then Mom, his voice behind me. I froze. "Mom, we don't have to do this," he said softly, but his eyes glinted, cold and sharp. "Just sign over control. It'll be easier for you. For both of us. I turned slowly to face him, my pulse roaring in my ears. And for the first time in my life, I saw my son not as a boy, not as the child I once held, but as a man I barely recognized. I drew in a long, steady breath. "No, Daniel," I said. "We do have to do this." And I pushed open the courtroom door. The wooden door swung open with a heavy groan, and I stepped inside the courtroom. The air was cool, almost too cool, with that sterile smell of polished floors and paper files. My heels clicked against the linoleum as I walked toward the defendant's table. Every step echoed louder than my own heartbeat. Or maybe it was that my heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat down slowly, smoothing the hem of my navy dress. Across the aisle, Daniel and his lawyer were already seated. His lawyer, a tall, sharp-featured man in a gray suit, adjusted his tie and glanced briefly at me, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in his way. Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms folded, lips pressed into a smug half-smile. He looked like he was exactly where he belonged, as if dragging his own mother to court was just another business meeting. The judge entered a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a nonsense expression. Everyone rose. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. I rose to my knees, trembling. "You may be seated," the judge said, her voice steady, commanding. I sat, clutching my purse on my lap like it was a shield. Inside was the old ledger, the record of every dollar I had given Daniel. It felt heavier than it was, like the weight of years of sacrifice compressed into pages of ink and paper. The judge shuffled some files, then looked up. Case number 173492. Daniel Carter versus Evelyn Carter. Petition for guardianship on grounds of incompetence. The words stung like nettles. Guardianship. Incompetence. Those weren't just legal terms. They were labels, brands that could strip me of who I was. Daniel's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client is gravely concerned for his mother's well-being. He believes she is no longer able to manage her financial affairs responsibly and seeks to establish guardianship to ensure her safety and stability." He sat down as if he had just recited a grocery list. The judge's eyes turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, how do you respond?" I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. "I am not incompetent, Your Honor. I have managed my own finances my entire life. I've worked, I've paid my bills, I've supported my son." My voice cracked slightly. I forced myself to take a deep breath. "And I do not need a guardian." The judge nodded, her gaze unreadable. "Very well. We will proceed." The testimony began with Daniel. His lawyer guided him with questions, each one carefully worded to paint a picture of me as weak, forgetful, unstable. "Mr. Carter, can you tell the court why you believe your mother is incapable of handling her financial affairs?" Daniel put on an expression of practiced concern, his voice soft, almost pitying. "She forgets things all the time. She misplaces important papers. She sends money to people without keeping proper records. I've had to bail her out of situations more than once." I wanted to scream. Misplaces papers. Every receipt, every bill, every tax form I had filed and kept for decades. Sends money to people? The only person I had sent money to endlessly was him. "And how does this affect your mother's stability?" The lawyer pressed. "She could lose everything," Daniel said gravely, shaking his head. "She doesn't realize how vulnerable she is. I just want to protect her, protect me." The words made bile rise in my throat. The lawyer finished, and the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, you may cross-examine." My hands trembled, but I rose slowly. I looked at my son, really looked at him. His eyes met mine, but there was no warmth there. Only calculation. "Daniel," I began, my voice steady but edged with steel. "Can you tell the court how much money I've given you over the past 15 years? He shifted in his seat. I don't know the exact number. Would you say it was a few thousand?" I asked. "Maybe I don't keep track." I reached into my purse and pulled out the ledger, holding it up for the court to see. "I do." The courtroom murmured softly. I opened the ledger to the final page and read aloud, $33,400. That's how much I have given you, Daniel. Every check, every transfer, every withdrawal. Do you deny this? Daniel's face flushed. That's not the point. You chose to give me that money. Yes, I cut in, my voice rising. I chose to because I loved you, because I believed in you. But when I said no just once, you dragged me here and called me incompetent. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. Watching the exchange, Daniel's lawyer stood abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant. This case is about Mrs. Carter's ability to manage her own finances. It's not about money she gave willingly to her son. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. It goes to motive. Continue. I looked back at Daniel. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. For the first time, he looked less like a confident plaintiff and more like a cornered man. But the battle was far from over. The lawyer pivoted, trying to discredit me. He asked about every little slip I had ever made, times I'd misplaced my keys, times I'd forgotten an appointment, times I'd mixed up receipts. Is it true, Mrs. Carter, that you once double paid your electric bill? Yes, I admitted. And I caught it myself the following week. Is it true you once left the stove on? I clenched my fists. For 2 minutes. I realized it and turned it off. He smirked. So you admit to making mistakes that could indicate cognitive decline. I opened my mouth. But the judge cut in, her tone sharp. Counselor, everyone makes mistakes. Do you have medical evidence to support your claims? The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. We will be presenting testimony from a physician. My stomach dropped. A physician. Daniel glanced at me, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. I gripped the edge of the table. What doctor could he possibly have convinced to testify against me? During the recess, I stepped into the hallway, my legs shaky. Linda was waiting there, her arms crossed, her face stormy. Evelyn, you're holding up better than I expected, she said, hugging me tight. But this doctor nonsense, they're playing dirty. I don't even know who it is, I whispered. What if they convince the judge? Linda pulled back, gripping my shoulders. You've got to fight this. You've got the ledger, you've got your wits, and you've got the truth. Don't let them spin it otherwise. I nodded, but my chest felt heavy. The bailiff called us back in, and I braced myself. When the physician entered, my breath caught. It was Dr. Stein, my own family doctor. Dr. Stein adjusted his glasses as he took the witness stand. He was a kind man in his 70s, gray hair thinning, hands slightly shaky. I had trusted him for years, gone to him for checkups, advice, reassurance. The lawyer questioned him first. Dr. Stein, in your professional opinion, do you believe Mrs. Carter is capable of managing her own financial affairs? Dr. Stein hesitated, glancing at me. I've never formally evaluated her cognitive abilities, but you've observed her as a patient, haven't you? Yes. And what have you observed? Another pause. She sometimes expresses stress. She has mentioned feeling forgetful at times. My heart thudded painfully. The lawyer leaned forward. Would you say those are signs of potential decline? Dr. Stein sighed. They could be, but they are also common in older adults under stress. I cannot make a definitive statement. The lawyer pressed, but Dr. Stein stood firm in his refusal to condemn me outright. Relief flooded through me, though the implications still lingered like a shadow. When it was my turn to question him, I rose slowly. Dr. Stein, have I ever been diagnosed with dementia? No. Have I ever failed to understand medical instructions? No. Do you believe I am of sound mind? He smiled faintly. Yes, Evelyn, I do. The courtroom murmured again, and the judge scribbled something on her notepad. I sat down, my hands still shaking, but my chest a little lighter. The day ended without a verdict. The judge called for more testimony and documentation, setting another hearing in 2 weeks. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of exhaustion nearly buckled me. Daniel brushed past me without a word, his shoulder bumping mine, deliberate and cold. I watched him walk away, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my independence. I was fighting to expose the truth that my son, the boy I had raised with love and sacrifice, had turned into a man willing to destroy me for money. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The 2 weeks between hearings felt like 2 lifetimes. Every day I woke up with a knot in my stomach, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me before my feet even touched the floor. I tried to carry on as normal, watering the flowers in the garden, tidying the house, even baking bread just to fill the rooms with something warm and familiar. But beneath it all, dread pulsed like a steady drumbeat. Daniel hadn't called, not once. No apologies, no explanations, no words at all. Just silence. A silence that screamed louder than any insult. Linda came by often, refusing to let me sit alone in the dark spiral of my thoughts. She brought groceries, told me silly stories to make me laugh, and even offered to help me find a lawyer. But I hesitated. Hiring a lawyer felt like admitting this fight was real, like signing my name on a declaration of war against my own son. "Evelyn," Linda said one afternoon, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, "he's not going to back down. You saw his face. This isn't just a tantrum. He's serious. And if you don't protect yourself, you could lose everything." I stared at my own reflection in the dark tea. My silver hair, my tired eyes. "But he's my son. How do you fight your own child?" She leaned forward. "By remembering that he stopped acting like your child the moment he dragged you into that courtroom." Her words stung. But they were true. The night before the second hearing, I sat at my desk with the ledger open in front of me. The neat columns of numbers staring back like a silent witness. $33,400. The sum total of my devotion. I flipped through the pages slowly, each entry unlocking a memory. April 2012, $750 for rent. He'd just moved into his first apartment, called me in a panic because he couldn't make the deposit. I had wired the money that same night. December 2015, $1,200 for tuition. He said he needed it to stay in school, that his scholarship was short. June 2018, $3,000 for a car down payment. He had promised it would help him get a better job. Promises. Always promises. None of them kept. My chest tightened as I realized that ledger wasn't just proof, it was my story. Written in dollars and cents, a story of sacrifice and, perhaps, of blindness. I tucked it carefully into my bag. Tomorrow, it would speak for me. The courthouse was colder the second time, or maybe I was just more aware of the chill creeping into my bones. Daniel was already there, his lawyer by his side, flipping through a sleek black briefcase. He looked immaculate in his tailored suit, hair slicked back, jaw tight. He didn't glance at me as I entered, as though I were invisible. But when his eyes flickered briefly to my bag, I saw a flash of something worry, maybe even fear. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. This time, Daniel's lawyer came armed with witnesses. The first was a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a woman I barely knew beyond a polite wave across the fence. "Mrs. Henderson," the lawyer asked, "have you observed any unusual behavior from Mrs. Carter?" She shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, once she left her trash cans out for 3 days. And another time she seemed confused about the recycling schedule." The courtroom rustled with soft chuckles. My cheeks burned. Trash cans? Recycling? Was this really evidence of incompetence? And would you say she sometimes appears forgetful? Mrs. Henderson nodded quickly. "Yes, sometimes." The lawyer smiled. No further questions. I stood slowly, my palms damp. "Mrs. Henderson, do you know how long I've lived in this neighborhood?" She blinked. About 20 years. "Have you ever seen me late with mortgage payments?" "Utilities shut off." "Have I ever asked you for money?" She hesitated. "No. Then your only concern is that I left my trash cans out." Her face reddened. I suppose so." "Thank you," I said softly and sat down. The judge made a note, her face unreadable. The next witness nearly made me laugh out loud in disbelief. It was Daniel's friend, Mark. A man I had always distrusted, slick, opportunistic, the kind who always seemed to appear when Daniel had money and vanish when he didn't. Mrs. Carter once gave Daniel money and then forgot she had, he testified. She called him weeks later, demanding it back, even though she had already agreed it was a gift. That's a lie. I burst out, my voice ringing in the courtroom. Mrs. Carter, the judge warned, please refrain from interrupting. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to sit. When it was my turn, I leaned forward. Mark, how often have you borrowed money from Daniel? His smirk faltered. That's not relevant. I think it is, I pressed. Because if Daniel's finances were tight and I was supporting him, then in a way, I was supporting you too. Isn't that true? He shifted in his seat, muttered something unintelligible. I let the silence hang heavy until the judge finally dismissed him. When my turn finally came, I rose slowly, clutching the ledger like a lifeline. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I am 65 years old. I pay my bills on time. I balance my checkbook. I cook, I clean, I live independently. The only thing I have ever done irresponsibly, if you want to call it that, is love my son too much. I open the ledger, my hands no longer trembling. This is a record of every dollar I have given him. $33,400. That's not incompetence. That's sacrifice. And it was never enough for him. I read entries aloud, each one a nail in the coffin of his case. May 2014, $500 for groceries. January 2016, $1,800 for rent. August 2019, $2,200 for car repairs. Again and again. I gave. And the first time I said no, he dragged me here. I looked directly at Daniel, my voice breaking with fury and pain. You're not protecting me. You're punishing me for not giving you more. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on me. Then Daniel shot to his feet. You don't understand. She's hiding money. She's lying. She's always lied. The outburst startled even his lawyer, who tried to tug him back into his seat. Hiding money. The judge repeated, her tone sharp. Mr. Carter, do you have evidence of this claim? Daniel's face flushed. His mouth opened, then closed. No evidence. The judge's eyes narrowed. Control your client, counselor. Another outburst like that, and I will hold him in contempt. My breath caught. For the first time, the tide seemed to be turning. But just as hope swelled in my chest, the lawyer made his final move. Your Honor, we request a financial evaluation of Mrs. Carter's accounts. If she has truly given away this much money, it raises questions about her judgment and ability to manage her resources. We believe an independent audit is necessary. My stomach dropped. An audit. They wanted to dig through my life, every purchase, every mistake, every late fee or overdraft. The judge considered. That is a reasonable request. Mrs. Carter, will you consent to a financial evaluation? I froze. If I said no, it would look like I was hiding something. If I said yes, every small slip would be magnified under a microscope. I glanced at Linda in the gallery. She gave me a firm nod. I drew in a long breath. Yes, Your Honor, I consent. The gavel struck and the hearing adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the air was heavy, storm clouds gathering overhead. Linda hurried to my side, gripping my arm. You did well in there, she said. You made the judge see the truth. But now they'll pick apart every penny I've ever spent, I whispered. Then let them, she said fiercely. You've got nothing to hide. And if anything, the audit will prove you've been more responsible than he has. I wanted to believe her. But as I watched Daniel stride away, phone already pressed to his ear. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't finished, that he still had cards left to play. And I was right. Because 3 days later, I received a letter that made my blood run cold. Daniel was petitioning not only for guardianship, but also for control of my house. The letter lay on my dining table like a snake, coiled and venomous. I must have read it a dozen times. But the words never changed. My son was asking the court to grant him guardianship and control over my home. My home, this modest little house I had poured 30 years of sweat and sacrifice into. The place where I had built my life after my husband died. The place where every corner held a memory. The dent in the wall where Daniel had kicked a soccer ball indoors. The faded pencil marks on the pantry door measuring his height year after year. He wanted it all. The betrayal deepened into something sharper than sorrow. Anger. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter, staring out the window at the garden. The rose bushes swayed gently in the breeze, oblivious to my turmoil. And I thought, if he takes this house, where will I go? Who will I be without it? The phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Linda. "I just got your message," she said, breathless. "He's after the house now." "Yes," I whispered. "He wants everything." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "Then we stopped playing nice. Evelyn, you need a lawyer today." I closed my eyes. "I can't afford you, can't afford not to," she interrupted. "I'll help you find one. You fought alone long enough." Her words hit me like a lifeline. For months I had been drowning in shame, in grief, in the unwillingness to accept what my son had become. But Linda was right. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was survival. The next morning I sat in a small law office downtown, the air thick with the smell of coffee and old books. Across the desk sat Margaret Hale, a sharp-eyed attorney in her 40s with auburn hair pulled into a nonsense bun. "So let me get this straight," she said, flipping through the file I had brought. "Your son has received over $33,000 from you. And when you stopped, he filed for guardianship and control of your assets, including your house." "Yes," I said softly. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "And you've managed your bills, your mortgage, your taxes without assistance." "I have. Always." She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against the file. "This isn't about protecting you. It's about greed. Plain and simple." Tears pricked my eyes. "But he's my son." She softened slightly. "And that's why it hurt so much. But in that courtroom, he's not your son. He's the petitioner, and you're the respondent. And we're going to make sure the judge sees the truth." For the first time in months, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. The weeks leading up to the next hearing were grueling. Margaret had me gather every document I could find: bank statements, utility bills, tax returns, mortgage payments. We organized everything into neat binders, each labeled and color-coded. "You're going to walk into that courtroom looking more competent than half the people who work there," Margaret said with a fierce smile. But as thorough as we were, I couldn't shake the anxiety. What if Daniel had more witnesses? What if he twisted my words again? What if the judge saw my tears as weakness? At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every fight we'd ever had. One memory surfaced again and again: Daniel, at 23, slamming his fist on the table when I refused to co-sign a loan for him. "You don't believe in me," he had shouted. "I do," I whispered. "I just can't risk losing everything." His eyes had gone cold then, colder than I'd ever seen. "You'll regret this." Maybe this was his way of keeping that promise. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread in the community, and curious neighbors filled the benches. I saw Mrs. Henderson again, avoiding my eyes. I saw Mark whispering something to Daniel with a smirk. Linda sat right behind me, her hands squeezing my shoulder for strength. Margaret stood tall beside me, her presence a shield. When the judge entered, the room hushed. The proceedings began with Daniel's lawyer presenting the petition for guardianship and control of the house. He spoke smoothly, his voice polished, but his words dripped poison. "Your Honor, it is clear that Mrs. Carter cannot manage her affairs. She has a history of irresponsible financial decisions, excessive gifting, and forgetfulness. My client seeks to ensure her safety by assuming responsibility for her finances and property, including the family home, which is at risk under her mismanagement." Margaret rose slowly, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "Your Honor, what my learned colleague calls excessive gifting is in fact a mother's love over $33,000 worth. Mrs. Carter is not incompetent. She is generous. And generosity is not a legal disability." She laid the binders on the table with a satisfying thud. "Here are her bank records, her paid bills, her tax returns, all in perfect order. My client has not missed a payment, not defaulted on a loan, not neglected a responsibility. She is more capable than many half her age. The judge flipped through the documents, her brow furrowing. Then came the witnesses. Daniel's lawyer called Mark again, who tried to paint me as forgetful and reckless. But Margaret dismantled him with precision. "Mr. Ellis, how often have you borrowed money from Mr. Carter?" Mark squirmed. "A few times. And isn't it true that some of that money came from Mrs. Carter?" He stammered, I don't know." Margaret's voice dripped with disdain. No further questions. Next came a former coworker of Daniel's, who claimed I had once sent money without a written agreement. Margaret pounced. "So you're saying Mrs. Carter trusted her own son enough not to demand a contract? That doesn't sound like incompetence. That sounds like family." The witness faltered. When it was my turn, Margaret guided me gently through questions about my daily routines, my finances, my responsibilities. I answered clearly, steadily, my voice strong despite the ache in my chest. Then she handed me the ledger. "Mrs. Carter, what is this document?" "My record of every dollar I gave my son," I said, holding it up. "And why did you keep it?" "Because I wanted to remind myself that love is not limitless. That even love has to be written down, accounted for, when it's not returned." The room was silent. Even the judge's eyes softened for a moment. Then it was Daniel's turn. He took the stand, his suit impeccable, his face carefully composed. "Why do you believe your mother needs guardianship?" his lawyer asked. Daniel's voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Because she's vulnerable. She gives away money without thinking. She forgets things. She could be taken advantage of. I'm only trying to protect her." Margaret's cross-examination was merciless. "Mr. Carter, isn't it true that you've received over $33,000 from your mother?" "Yes. And isn't it true that when she finally said no, you filed this petition?" His jaw tightened. "She left me no choice. No choice." Margaret's voice rose. "Or no more money." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Daniel flushed, his mask cracking. "She doesn't understand. She's hiding things." Objection. His lawyer shouted, but the damage was done. The judge rapped her gavel. Order. By the end of the day, the tension was unbearable. The judge announced she would review the evidence and issue a decision at the next session. As we left the courtroom, Daniel brushed past me, his eyes blazing. He leaned close, his whisper like venom. "You think you've won, Mom? You haven't seen anything yet." A chill ran through me. Linda grabbed my arm. "Don't let him scare you. He's rattled. That means we're getting to him." But as I stepped into the cool evening air, couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was planning something more, something darker. Because that night, when I returned home, I found an envelope shoved under my door. No return address. Inside, a single photograph of me standing in my kitchen, taken through the window. The photograph trembled in my hands. It was grainy, but clear enough to chill me to the bone. Me in my kitchen, hunched over the sink, unaware that a camera lens was pointed at me through the window. My sanctuary, my little house, suddenly felt violated. I locked the doors and drew the blinds, my heart hammering. Someone had been watching me. Was it Daniel? One of his friends? A hired hand? Whoever it was, the message was clear. We're watching. We can reach you anywhere. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside, sent me bolt upright in bed. I clutched the photograph until the dawn broke, pale and uncertain. The next morning, I slid the envelope across Margaret's desk. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she examined it. "This is intimidation," she said. "Classic tactic. He's trying to rattle you before the ruling." My voice was hoarse. "But how do I prove it's him?" "You don't need to prove it," she said firmly. "We'll present it to the judge. Let her see the lengths he's willing to go." Linda sat beside me, her hands steady on mine. "You're not alone, Evelyn." Not anymore. The final hearing arrived on a stormy morning, thunder rolling low across the sky as if the heavens themselves understood the weight of the day. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Daniel sat rigid at his table, jaw clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead. He looked less polished this time, dark circles under his eyes betraying restless nights. Margaret laid the photograph on the evidence table with quiet force. Your Honor, before you render judgment, you should see what my client discovered at her home. A photograph of her, taken without her knowledge. Left in an envelope with no return address, gasps rippled through the spectators. Daniel's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. This is circumstantial and irrelevant. Overruled, the judge snapped. She studied the photo, her expression tightening. Mr. Carter, do you know anything about this? Daniel's face flushed crimson. No, I've never seen it. Do you deny attempting to intimidate your mother during these proceedings? I said no. He shouted, his voice cracking. The judge's gaze was cold. Control yourself, Mr. Carter. I sat silently, my pulse thundering, but inside me something shifted. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. I pitied him. He was unraveling, and the whole courtroom could see it. Margaret rose for her closing argument, her voice steady and commanding. Your Honor, this case has never been about incompetence. It has been about greed. Daniel Carter received over $33,000 from his mother. When she finally set a boundary, he retaliated by dragging her here, attempting to strip her of her rights, her home, and her dignity. Mrs. Carter is not incompetent. She is independent, responsible, and more than capable of managing her life. What she is, Your Honor, is a mother who gave too much, and a woman who deserves protection from exploitation, not guardianship. The words echoed in the courtroom, firm as a gavel strike. Daniel's lawyer attempted a rebuttal, but his voice faltered. The photograph had shaken their foundation, and the truth was bleeding through the cracks. The judge leaned back, steepling her fingers. Silence fell heavy. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear, deliberate. After reviewing the evidence, the testimony, and the financial records, I find no grounds to declare Mrs. Carter incompetent. The petition for guardianship is denied. A rush of air escaped my lungs. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court is deeply concerned by the petitioner's motives and conduct, including the evidence suggesting attempts at intimidation. This matter may warrant further investigation. Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes wide. As for the request to assume control of Mrs. Carter's home, the judge continued, her voice like steel. That request is not only denied, but it is offensive to the values of family and justice this court upholds. This home remains solely the property of Mrs. Carter. The gavel struck. Case dismissed. For a moment the world blurred. Applause erupted softly from the gallery, whispers of relief and support. Linda clutched me in a fierce hug, tears streaming down her cheeks. You did it, Evelyn, she whispered. You stood your ground. Margaret smiled, professional but warm. You didn't just win, Mrs. Carter. You reclaimed your life. I looked across the aisle. Daniel stood frozen, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. Our eyes met, and for a flicker of a second, I saw the little boy he once was, the boy who clung to me in the night after nightmares, who begged for one more bedtime story. But then it was gone, swallowed by the man he had become. He stormed out of the courtroom without a word. And just like that, I felt the chains around my heart break. The days that followed were strange, quiet, almost surreal. For the first time in years, my phone didn't ring with demands. My mailbox didn't hold threats. I sat in my garden, the roses blooming in full color, and realized I could breathe again. Neighbors stopped by, some sheepish, some apologetic. Even Mrs. Henderson came with a pie, mumbling that she was sorry for her testimony. I accepted her apology with grace, because bitterness would only keep me chained to the past. Linda and I celebrated with coffee and laughter, our bond stronger than ever. Margaret called once more to assure me that if Daniel tried anything again, she would be ready. But deep down, I knew something had shifted forever. My son had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And yet, strangely, I felt peace. Because for the first time in decades, I was no longer just Daniel's mother. I was Evelyn Carter, woman survivor, whole. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea. watching the light turn golden across the yard. My thoughts drifted, not with sorrow, but with clarity. I had spent my life giving until I was empty, mistaking sacrifice for love, mistaking enabling for care. But boundaries, I realize now, are also love. Love for yourself, love for your dignity, love for the life you work to build. I whispered into the evening air. I promised to myself, no one will ever take that from me again. The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of roses. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Reflection, looking back, I see now that my story was not just about betrayal. It was about awakening. My son's greed forced me to confront a truth I had avoided for too long. That love without limits is not love at all, it is surrender. I learned that independence is precious, dignity is non-negotiable, and respect must be mutual, even in family, especially in family. And I learned that even when blood betrays you, you can find strength in yourself and in the friends who stand like family when you need them most. So if you're listening to my story and find pieces of yourself in it, hear this. You are not weak for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for saying no. You are not selfish for protecting your future. You are worthy of respect. You are worthy of peace. And sometimes the bravest act of love is the one you show yourself. The storm had passed. Justice had spoken. And as I closed the ledger one final time, I knew this wasn't the story of what I had lost. It was a story of what I had found. Freedom, dignity, and the strength to finally choose myself. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of life, family, and resilience. I would love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below and tell me how this story made you feel, or what lesson you took from it. Your voices mean so much here. Thank you for spending your precious time with me today. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until we meet again in the next story on Voices of Auntie Leo, take care, stay strong, and keep believing in yourself. See you soon.